So next up is Travis Kinney, and he's going to be telling us about the local agency working group, which is a pretty important and pretty active working group going on right now. So please welcome Travis.
So if you want to know how you become a chair or a co-chair of a working group, all you have to do is be in a meeting like this and say, hey, I have an idea, right? Where are all the locals at? Bam, you're the co-chair of a working group. So this working group formed, I guess it's been probably 4 or 5 years now, out in Orlando, and it was that simple. We really need to engage with locals. This is a great forum to do that. So we set up a working group. Increased preservation of local infrastructure assets. We're doing that through educational outreach opportunities, and we want to identify successes that are happening at the local level. Greg Freeman is the co-chair of this working group, and I think this is actually the very first Western meeting that he was not at, like since the inception. He's in Italy at his daughter's wedding. We have about 40 members in the group, and some of the biggest things that we've got from this is engaging with other agencies. So the LTAPs and NACE have been actual huge champions to this working group. We had this introduction to bridge preservation training. Greg and I've gotten pretty good at giving this. It's been 20 times now. It's an hour and a half. It's 100% virtual. It's free. If you know of any opportunities to do that, let us know. One of the new initiatives of this working group is kind of this next phase. So we've done all this virtual training, and we all know that we're tired of virtual, right? And so we want to actually get out in the field and engage with locals, and our industry members really want that too. What we want to do are these industry demo rodeos. So who here was at the national meeting in Orlando? Okay, so there was outdoor demonstrations during that, very well received. Industry wants to do more of that. And what we need from this group are opportunities to do that, specifically at the local level. We'll work with a group and then actually come out and do that. This is actually not a working group deliverable, but it's one that we supported. This is through the FHWA Bridge Preservation Expert Task Group. This is a guide that was put out, or actually a report. GPI helped support this and put this document together. It's a fantastic document, and it was it kind of morphed a little bit. Started as we were, yes, you did laughing down. It morphed a little bit. I think they call that scope creep. But it started out as like, what's happening at the local level nationally, right? Let's put out a survey, let's see who we can get to respond, and just kind of get a snapshot in time. And then from there we said, okay, well, what are the barriers to preservation at the local level, right? Like, we know that there's federal funding available for preservation. We have that whole guide that shows what's going on or what's available to be funded. But then when we asked around and said, who's using federal funds at the local level for preservation, everyone said, we can't do it, it's hard. Red tape. And so we're like, well, what is the red tape? And so this guide did a great job of actually reaching out, identifying successes and barriers to preservation at the local levels, and just kind of summarize it all together. This is actually now available and published on there. It's free to use and to borrow from. This is what's covered within it. So it identified what funding sources are locals using for preservation, right? Are you coming up with your own funding sources, or are you going and reaching out to federal funds or state funds? Like, so there's a lot of times states will do a fund exchange and use state funds for local agencies. What actions are you doing for preservation? The status of local agency preservation programs, right? Like I said, there's a wide range of local agencies. There are some that are, one person is leading everything that they have: utilities, roadway, drainage, pavement, and bridges, right? So they're stretched thin. And there's others that have a whole bridge division. And then specifically what we were going after was the successes and challenges to funding preservation, and really wanted to bring those successes forward. So I did grab a snippet from the report and wanted to highlight 3 of the successes that we have identified as they've figured it out. They have a way. It's not like it's the way to do preservation at the local level, but you always want to bring those successes forward. Michigan DOT really led this charge first, right? They adopted preservation into their infrastructure program a long time ago. And they showed through dedicated funds for preservation that they were able to actually slow the rate of bridges that were going to structurally deficient. They got the locals to buy into the same process. Typically they're looking at 30%-ish of their total funding goes to preservation. They've streamlined the NEPA process. They have their own local entities that actually break out and decide and select projects for their SIP, their bridge program funding. And then when they're doing that process, they look around and look through the list when it's all said and done and say, there's not enough preservation. They go and pull in different preservation projects. And so it's not like a mandated process that filters through and it drops preservation in. It's that they're actively working as a group, collectively across the state, at the local level, and saying, we need more of this, right? We need to keep doing it. The thing that's really impressive with Michigan is that they have a lot of structurally deficient bridges, right? So it's not like they have good inventory, they can afford not to do replacements. It's that they're dedicating funds separately to do it. And it's just a great success story. Indiana is another type of success story. They're not dedicating a process at the STIP bridge program level for carving out preservation funds. They're doing it through the LTAPs and through some great kind of leaders. Pat Connor with the Indiana LTAP, you gotta mention him. He's been a champion for preservation at that local level. They put together their own conferences, they put together training opportunities, and they've really just spread the word throughout Indiana that this is a good thing to do. This is some of the steps you can take right away and start doing it. And so they're really an example of education first. You know, it's not that all these counties don't want to do preservation, it's that maybe they don't understand the benefits of it, or they don't know where to start, or they don't know how to fund it. You get one really good champion like Pat, and it spreads, and then you get a whole bunch more, and now they have a great preservation program throughout Indiana. California is another interesting example that we found. We're actually still looking at diving into this a little bit further, but they've come up with fairly recently a creative funding incentive to encourage local agencies to do preservation. So this isn't a use federal funds on preservation, it's use your own funds on preservation and receive credit towards your match, right? So federally funded projects, you got to pay a match. They have a program in place that is the BIC, the Bridge Program Investment Credit. I think it's actually a really interesting setup, and we're trying to engage with some more local agencies in California to see how well it's working. Like I said, it's a fairly recent program, but the idea is that these smaller projects are easier to deliver without larger federal funding. I won't say strings attached, but through the federal funding process, right? And so they recognize that and said, use your own funds, and then when you put it in, we'll put it into the bank for you as this credit towards when you do get a larger federally funded project. So those are the 3 success stories I wanted to highlight. There are others that are in this report guide. I wanted to give you a link to it, but I actually didn't have it at the time that I put this together, but it's this FHWA HIF-22. I think if you Google search prioritizing preservation for locally owned bridges, you should be able to turn this up and find it. This working group, we meet once a month. It's just a conference call. We're always looking for other folks to get involved. Like I said, the LTAPs, NACE, individual bridge owners, consultants, FHWA, and industry, you're all welcome. If you have any interest in engaging with this group, let me know.
Roughly how many people are on the call each month?
You know, it varies quite a bit. So you got somewhere between 15 and 25 maybe. We are looking at doing some technical presentations that we'll start sending out for like on a more national scale, I think. A lot of the working groups are going towards that, actually providing technical content during it. So far, the working groups have been dedicated to giving direction to what we're delivering, as opposed to actually providing training during our meeting. All right, thanks.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.